Welcome to 2023, my dudes, dudettes, and all dudisms in between. I know I'm just a little bit fashionably late, but I actually think it's quite appropriate considering how far into 2023 we've got to wait until we actually see Doctor Who return under this new era, under RTD. And under RTD is something I'll happily be just for doing this. Like, is anyone else still just not over the fact that this is the reality we're in? RTD is doing Who again. Nature is healing. No, it's not. But speaking of RTD doing Who, my hopes and worries for this era. I know this is a video that most people were making up to a year ago, back when we originally found out he was coming back, but I wanted to wait until we knew a lot more about what's coming so I had some stuff to base my thoughts on, and now that we've seemingly had most of the major news and things to know outside of leaks and rumors, this seemed like a good time to finally put my own version of this together. So let's just dive right in and start out with hopes. So one of the things we know about the upcoming 60th anniversary with David Tennant's 14th Doctor is this fucker. And these fuckers. These fuckers being Beep the Meep and the Roth Warriors. So these hail from some old, and I mean old, Doctor Who comic strips. From what I've seen, they start off with a 1980 comic strip with the 4th Doctor called Doctor Who and the Star Beast. So it is a very deep cut in terms of bringing something back. I haven't read the strip because I imagine it's probably impossible to find, but from what I've seen people talking about, this cute, adorable little bundle of joy is a con artist war criminal responsible for countless deaths and selling shitloads of people into slavery. Yep. This thing. And these big old boys, the Roth Warriors, I have no clue if I'm pronouncing that right, are a bunch of genetically engineered super soldiers with the set goal of capturing and killing Beep the Meep. I think. Now, this choice for the 60th to really dig deep for a monster to bring back is an absolute stroke of genius, and my hope related to this is that we see more of this throughout the next era. That when picking monsters and villains to bring back, RTD doesn't just look to classic Who for a monster that a lot of people will kinda like and could maybe be some kind of minor event that they're returning, but digs for those really, really deep lore cuts and picks out some real wacky and obscure stuff to bring back to the screen, and I hope we see this regularly. Now, for ages in Doctor Who, people have been kind of disappointed with how frequently the franchise relies on nostalgia for its monsters, or how original monsters have been less than stellar, which I'll get into in a second. Whereas this approach, in my opinion, is the perfect happy medium. I really think you can have your cake and eat it too with this approach. Because on the one hand, you're bringing something back, but something I'm not familiar with, which as a fan is interesting to be exposed to a new and really obscure facet of the show's history. You know, it's interesting. And on the other hand, if it's obscure enough, then to the general audience, it basically is a new and original monster, and may as well be one, because like, I mean, who the fuck had heard of Beep the Meep before all this? Before we all started talking about it? Like, who the fuck has actually read Doctor Who and the Star Beast? Or actually had before we knew Beep the Meep was coming back? And if you have, and you weren't around when this comic strip came out, and it wasn't the hot new current thing to discover because of the news, then you're either lying, or the obscure thing we need to bring back for you is having sex.
Social interaction will cease.
Now, obviously, I ain't trying to say that I don't want original monsters. Actually, it's the complete opposite, and that's my second hope. As a big fan of animation and character designs, I love me some weird, trippy creature and monster designs. Now, obviously, I know this ain't comparable. We're dealing with a live-action show here, not a cartoon, although I do think comics are a perfect sector of the franchise to pull from inspiration because of their more cartoonish nature. And I know this show isn't exactly operating on a Marvel budget, but we already know we've got a big old budget increase, and we've already seen the power of what the new CGI can do, especially when based on a practical prop. So basically, when it comes to our original monsters, I'm hoping we move away from the generic humanoid alien with just a guy in a costume. I want the show to really flex its CGI and prop design. I want to see some weird shit. Give me some trippy Adventure Time Rick and Morty monsters in CGI. Give me some biblically accurate angel type eldritch horrors. We've got a real chance to step it up a notch, so let's go for it, you know? My next hope is one that I know a lot of people can agree with me on. One thing that's felt sorely missing since the RTD era is some great world building propped up by progression between stories and series. Now, it's not like the Moffat and Chibnall era completely lacked this, but RTD's first era really did feel like its own interconnected world where everything had consequences and one thing led directly into another. We've got side characters, usually the families of companions, who go through their own arcs and progression in the background, something the following eras didn't do to anywhere near the same degree. We've got the events over the course of the era coming back to not just be referenced, but to show how they impact the world at large. There's loads of little Easter eggs and lines of dialogue that do this, but we also have an episode like Turn Left, which shows the culmination of all these things, in an alternate timeline without the Doctor, but still. Which again, barely present at all in the following eras. And we had the Dalek stories, which kind of take a page out of the book of the classic era Dalek stories from Genesis to Remembrance, having the events of each one lead into the next. Except I'd argue in Russel's Who, it was even more direct, as we have Dalek directly setting up the Series 1 finale by filling us in from the Time War, the Series 2 finale introducing the cult of Skaro, who are working directly below the Emperor, also fled the Time War, and we're basically following them for the rest of the Dalek stories in the era. And it was fucking awesome. I really miss this approach. If RTD does do this with the Daleks again, I wouldn't be mad at all. While we've had some good ones here and there, we definitely haven't had a great Dalek story in a while. But to be honest, I actually wouldn't mind a different monster taking this mantle. I wouldn't mind him having a stab at this with the Cybermen maybe, for example. We haven't had that many great Cyberman stories in New Who at all, really, and it's been a really long time since we had Cybermen stories that felt connected to each other. But if I really got my way, I think I'd actually want it to be a classic monster that's had some stories, but never really had the luxury of an arc that flows between them, as opposed to the Daleks, Cybermen, and Master who've already had that. Imagine RTD doing what he did with the Daleks, giving them stories that flow through each other and having them be the big bad of the era, but with, say, the Sontarans or something. They'd probably be my first pick. Those guys especially have way more potential than I think the show's ever truly reached for. Plus, for an excuse to use the Chibnall-era Sontaran designs again and have them be more prominent, like, yes please. But yeah, overall those are my main hopes for RTD2. More obscure deep cut villain and monster returns like Beep the Meep, wackier and more out there original monsters, and a return of the excellent world building and story progression of RTD's first era, plus for the era to have a main villain arc flowing between stories like the Daleks did the first time round. So I guess it's now time to talk about worries, but before I do, I kind of want to address a worry, if you can even call it that I've seen expressed by a whole load of people. And it can basically be summed up as, I hope he gives us something new and fresh. Makes sense, valid, I can agree. I hope RTD doesn't just do his first era again. I'm sorry, what? Like, just let that sink in for a sec. No, not you, Dave, we'll chill later.
God, the carpet! Oh god, the carpet here is so soft! Look at it!
I hope RTD doesn't just do his first era again. My big problem with this is, what would that even look like, genuinely? I do have one worry that kinda relates to this that I'll talk about in a sec, but overall I have no idea what this is supposed to mean. Like, are people who say this legit worried that Ncuti's Doctor will be exactly the same as 10 and will get a companion exactly the same as Rose, who ends up falling in love with him and then gets trapped in a parallel universe after a Dalek and Cyberman war, followed by a companion who loves him but he just uses as a rebound, ending with the return of a Time Lord villain masquerading as a political figure who takes over the world, and ending with a companion who's just the Doctor's friend and ends up being a special star child who merges with the Doctor and helps stop the universe being destroyed, all with stories throughout that copy the first era verbatim? Like, I know that's an extreme takeaway from that, but I'm just like, well, what else could it mean? Again, define RTD just doing his era again. What would that even entail? It's actually very loose and could mean literally anything when you think about it, and that leads me to what my first worry is. It isn't even to do with the content of the upcoming era, but more to do with the fandom, and it's that people will accuse RTD of this, just doing his first era again, regardless of what he does. That people will go in expecting this, waiting for the first microscopic sign of it, and if we get an arc or character that even vaguely resembles one he did before, or a story that follows even slightly similar beats to one he wrote before, even though practically all Who stories adhere to some kind of formula that will have been done before to at least some capacity, and it's about your own personal spin you put on it and your own mysteries and character beats you inject into it, and that's just true, deal with it. That people will immediately write it off and discredit it as this. And we kind of already had this when it was revealed, when a lot of characters from Series 4, such as Donna, were coming back for the 60th, and all that stuff about the Albion stuff from Series 14 got leaked, and people immediately drew parallels with the Vote Saxon stuff in Series 3. And I really hope this doesn't end up being the case, because if that's the future of Doctor Who discourse, then it's going to be so fucking tiring. I wonder what's going on Doctor Who Twitter today. Actually, wait, do I care? Do I really care? You know what, fuck this, I'm going outside. See this? This right here? This is riveting. Where's all the discourse about this? One day the world will wake up to all the interesting conversation to be had about you once they go outside. So while I eagerly await the truly meaningful discourse over whether the best grass species for gardens is rye, fescue or meadow, the optimum height grass should grow or be cut to, and what time of year the grass looks best, my next worry is one that I'm sure some will probably claim is hypocritical based on what I just said, but it really isn't, and I'm gonna explain why. I really don't want any romantic angle as a subplot or arc or dynamic at all between the Doctor and companion this next era. And I know that saying that might sound at odds with my last point, but like, that wasn't unique to RTD's first era. Like, sure, he may have started it, but both the Moffat and Chibnall eras followed suit with this to the point where it's more become an issue with New Who in general rather than his first era. Again, sure, he may have kind of started it, but if he does that again, then that wouldn't be him just repeating his first era. At worst, it'd be him just resuming the status quo. And that's why I really hope he breaks away from this, because it's gotten boring and it's overplayed and there's just much more interesting stuff you can do with a Doctor and companion dynamic. And also because I actually really don't like the romantic angle between Doctor and companion. It's actually a little creepy when you really think about it. And plus, companions who can be great characters in their own right and feel more like a good friend of the Doctor's, just having a load of fun traveling with them, are just so much more fun to watch. I have no way to prove this since there's nothing concrete backing it up. It was a leak, or actually more likely a rumor, I think I remember seeing somewhere. But I remember seeing something saying that the dynamic between the 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday was going to be more akin to a feisty, sassy, gossipy girl and camp gay best friend dynamic, and if that actually is true, then my god, that would be amazing. So I wanted to add a third worry here so that we've got a nice round 3 for 3, but to be honest, I don't really have one. I have a lot of faith in RTD to do this well. Like I said in my video I made when his return was announced, he's had loads of time to evolve as a writer since his first era, and he clearly has, because he's led great project after great project, and is clearly very passionate about the franchise. Plus, I'm not going in expecting anything specific. I'm always down to give any new era a shot. The Chibnall era kind of brought us an entirely new vibe for the show, which I wasn't expecting, but the fact that it did is great. That vibe wasn't really for me, but I still watched each episode as they came out the whole way through. I gave the era a fair shake. I'm just down for anything new the show brings me, and I'll always give it a try. I guess if there is anything I could say is a worry, it's that maybe I'll have bigged it up too much and end up being disappointed in it. And yeah, that's possible I guess, but I just don't see it happening. As long as it's something fresh that's just well written and a good time to watch and discuss, then I'll be happy. That's all I can really ask. So go on, Russell. I'm excited for the new era, my guy. You got this. And if for whatever reason it ends up not being my thing, at least there's still even more Who content in the world to talk about and to add to the ever-expanding lexicon of the show's history. Which is really the joy of being a fan of it, isn't it? All the different periods and eras across the decades to check out and discuss, and maybe find new favourites and new comfort viewing. But that's gonna be it from me for now. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to drop a like and let me know if you have any thoughts in the comments. And hey, and if you want to see more, why not subscribe? It's free, and I know I had a bit of a late start this year, but I've got plenty of ideas for videos swimming around in my head that I'm excited for you to see. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, all you BEA beautiful people, however many or few of you there may be, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!
Doc, I fucking love it here, man. Oh, this is fucking amazing, dude.